On November 16, 1957, when police entered a small farmhouse in Plainfield, Wisconsin, they discovered something that would forever change how America understood evil. What they found wasn't just evidence of murder. It was a house of horrors so disturbing that it would inspire some of the most terrifying characters in cinema history. Norman Bates, Leatherface, and Buffalo Bill. But Ed Gein was real. Plainfield, Wisconsin in the 1950s was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. Population 647. Ed Gein was considered harmless, a quiet handyman who did odd jobs, babysat children, and was always polite to the women at the hardware store. Harold Schechter, author of Deviant, The Shocking True Story of Ed Gein, explains that neighbors described him as gentle, even meek. He'd shovel snow for elderly widows and help with farm work. No one suspected anything. That's what made it so terrifying. Evil wore the most ordinary face. But behind the walls of his isolated farmhouse, Ed Gein was living a nightmare of his own creation, one that began decades earlier with a woman who would dominate his entire existence, his mother, Augusta. Augusta Gein was a religious fanatic who believed all women except herself were instruments of the devil. She kept Ed and his brother Henry isolated from the world, reading to them daily from the Old Testament about death, murder, and divine retribution. Dr. George Arndt, the forensic psychiatrist who examined Gein, noted that Ed never had a chance at a normal life. His mother essentially told him that sex was evil, women were evil, and the only pure woman was her. When she died in 1945, Ed's entire world collapsed. After Augusta's death, Ed sealed off her bedroom and living room, preserving them as shrines. But preservation wasn't enough. He needed her back. And that's when Ed Gein began visiting the local cemetery at night. Between 1947 and 1952, Gein robbed graves of recently buried middle-aged women who resembled his mother. But he wasn't stealing jewelry or valuables. He was taking the bodies themselves. Schechter describes what Gein did with those bodies as almost incomprehensible. He was trying to create a woman suit, literally attempting to crawl inside the skin of his dead mother. It's one of the most disturbed cases of maternal obsession in criminal history. On November 16, 1957, hardware store owner Bernice Worden disappeared. The last receipt in her store was made out to Ed Gein. When police arrived at his farm that evening, what they discovered defied imagination. Bernice Worden's decapitated body hung in the shed, dressed like a deer carcass. Inside the house, they found bowls made from human skulls, chairs upholstered with human skin, a belt made of nipples, lampshades and wastebaskets constructed from faces, and masks made from the faces of dead women hanging on the walls. Robert Bloch, author of Psycho, recalled in a 1962 interview that when he heard about what they found in that house, he couldn't sleep for days. He lived just 40 miles away. This wasn't a story. This was real, and it was happening in quiet, rural Wisconsin. That's when he knew he had to write Psycho. In his interactions with police officers and even diarying the trial, Ed showed no remorse. He described his actions like someone discussing gardening. The disconnection from reality was complete. He didn't see these women as people. They were objects, pieces, material to reconstruct his mother. In the end, he confessed to killing 2 women, tavern owner Mary Hogan in 1954 and Bernice Worden in 1957. He was found mentally incompetent to stand trial and spent the rest of his life in mental institutions. He died in 1984 at age 77, never showing genuine remorse for his actions. But Ed Gein's influence didn't die with him. His case file became required reading for the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit. In addition to Psycho, his story inspired countless other books, documentaries, and films including The Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Silence of the Lambs, both of which continue to terrify audiences today. Schechter argues that Gein fundamentally changed our cultural understanding of serial killers. Before Ed, we imagined monsters as obvious, foreign, strange, threatening. Ed Gein taught us that the most dangerous person might be your quiet neighbor who waves hello every morning. That's a horror that never goes away. The Plainfield farmhouse was burned down by arsonists in 1958. The town wanted to erase the horror from their community. But some things can't be burned away. Ed Gein proved that true evil doesn't announce itself with fanfare. He died in the Mendota Mental Health Institute on July 26, 1984. He was buried in an unmarked grave in Plainfield Cemetery, the same cemetery he had robbed decades earlier.